All right, let's jump right into the world of Indian insurance. Today, we're going to be looking at New India Assurance Company.
Oh,
Specifically, we're breaking down their second quarter results for fiscal year 2025.
sounds good.
We've got a pretty interesting set of sources, I think, for this deep dive. We've got some questions from investors about specific parts of the report,
Hmm.
and then we have the official press release straight from New India Assurance themselves.
Right.
That includes, the whole shebang, the auditor's report, and all those nitty-gritty financial statements. So get ready to cut through the jargon, folks, because we're going to help you understand what's actually happening with New India Assurance's performance.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is I think having those investor questions gives us some insight into what the market is focusing on.
Right.
And then we get to see how the company responds to that in their own narrative.
Yeah.
And then we've got that independent lens of the auditor's assessment as well.
Right.
So multiple perspectives on the same story.
Exactly. Okay, well, first things first, let's talk about those big numbers.
Yeah.
The ones that jump out at you when you're looking at a company like this. New India Assurance, they're massive. I mean, their gross written premiums, which is essentially the total value of premiums they collected in Q2, reached 9,701 crore.
Wow.
That's billions US dollars, folks.
Yeah.
And their total assets are even bigger, 88,181 crore.
Big company.
Yeah.
Big numbers. Those are certainly figures that, reflect a company operating on a massive scale. It definitely speaks to their position in the Indian insurance market. One number, though, that might raise an eyebrow is the profit after tax for the quarter.
Right.
It sits at 7,356 lakh,
Okay.
which is actually down from the same period last year.
Mm.
So while they're clearly bringing in a huge amount of business, it seems like their profitability has taken a bit of a dip.
Yeah, investors are always looking at that bottom line,
Of course.
And speaking of investors, the investor relations document we have, it actually highlights several questions about profitability. They're digging into things like net premium income, which is what's left over after paying out reinsurance.
Right.
And then, of course, they're expressing concern about the underwriting profit taking a dip.
Yeah, now underwriting profit is a really critical metric for any insurance company because it essentially reflects the profitability of their core insurance operations.
Okay.
So you're looking at how much money they make from premiums after paying out claims and all their operating expenses.
Makes sense.
And for New India Assurance, that underwriting profit for the half year is down 361.948 crore. That's significant.
Wow.
Now, this could be due to a variety of factors. I mean, maybe there were more claims than usual in a particular line of business, or perhaps they had to adjust their reinsurance agreements and they're taking on more risk themselves. So these are the kinds of things that, would warrant a little bit more investigation to understand what's driving that decrease.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the raw numbers, right? It's about what story those numbers are telling us about how the company's operating.
Exactly.
And what potential risks they might be facing. Speaking of potential risks, we have to bring up the auditor's report.
Yes.
I know a lot of people think of it as, that dry technical document, but sometimes there are little nuggets in there that can raise some serious questions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the auditor's report is a critical piece of the puzzle because it provides that independent assessment of the company's financial reporting and internal controls. It can really make you think.
For example, in this case, the auditors, they flagged something called, and I'm going to try to get this right, balances due from reinsurers. And they basically said, it's a little messy. So, for someone who's not steeped in the insurance world every day, what does that even mean?
Right.
Should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, let's break that down a little bit. So
Okay.
think of reinsurance as insurance for insurance companies. So New India Assurance, when they underwrite a policy, they might choose to transfer a portion of that risk to another insurance company. That's the reinsurer.
Okay.
And this basically helps them manage their overall risk exposure. So when the auditors say messy balances, it suggests that there might be some discrepancies or complexities in how these reinsurance transactions are being accounted for.
Okay.
It could signal a couple things.
Yeah.
Maybe there are delays in settling balances with those reinsurers. Or perhaps the data related to these transactions isn't being tracked very accurately. Either way, it does raise some questions about, the company's risk management practices and even potentially the accuracy of their financial reporting. So it's definitely something that I think investors would want to pay close attention to.
For sure. For sure. And then there's another point that they brought up that I found really curious. New India Assurance has this, I guess you could call it a unique way of classifying all their fixed deposits as cash, even those that mature in more than 3 months. Most companies would classify those as investments, right?
Right.
Not cash. So what's the deal with that? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, that's a practice that definitely deviates from the norm,
Yeah.
from standard accounting practices. And it's a move that could potentially inflate their cash position on the balance sheet.
Okay.
So by classifying those fixed deposits as cash, even if they're not readily available, they're essentially boosting their apparent liquidity,
I see.
which could be a way to project, a stronger financial picture
Yeah.
to investors and the market in general. But it does make you wonder, are they trying to mask some potential liquidity challenges down the road? It's a question worth asking.
Yeah, very interesting. So we've got these, potentially questionable accounting practices, some concerns about risk management.
Right.
But let's switch gears for a second
Okay.
and go back to those investor questions because they were really keen on understanding New India Assurance's market share and what's driving their growth. So what can we actually glean from the financials on those 2 points?
Yeah, good question. Well, one thing that's, noticeably absent is any explicit statement about their market share.
Oh, interesting.
We don't have that specific figure, so it'd be interesting to see how they actually stack up against their competitors, but we'd have to look elsewhere for that information.
Okay.
We do, though, have some clues about their growth drivers from this segment reporting. It shows that their most profitable lines of business are motor and fire insurance,
Okay.
but the segment that's generating the most revenue is actually health insurance.
Interesting.
So that suggests that health insurance is a real key area of focus for them.
So are they leaning more towards, maximizing profitability, like squeezing as much as they can out of those motor and fire segments? Or are they prioritizing that expansion into potentially higher growth areas like health insurance?
Right.
I guess that's a strategic decision, right, that they're going to have to make.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, maximizing profit where they can in those established lines, but also trying to capitalize on emerging opportunities.
Right.
And let's not forget the broader context here. The Indian insurance market is changing rapidly. I mean, you've got increasing digitization, growing awareness of insurance, and a young population with evolving needs.
For sure, for sure. And that actually brings us to a critical question for any insurance company, which is solvency.
Yes.
Their ability to actually pay out claims when things go wrong. I'm sure that's at the top of every investor's mind.
Absolutely. It's crucial.
So what's the situation with New India Assurance in that regard?
Well, in this area, they actually seem to be in a very strong position.
Yeah.
Their solvency ratio, which is a measure of their ability to meet their long-term debt obligations, stands at a very healthy 1.81.
Okay.
That's well above the regulatory requirement of 1.5. So it indicates that they have more than enough assets to cover their liabilities.
Yeah.
And it really suggests a good level of financial stability.
Yeah.
Should give investors some reassurance that they're well equipped to handle those potential claims.
That is reassuring, especially considering those earlier points about potential issues raised in the auditor's report.
Right. But those shouldn't be disregarded completely. Remember, they did flag weaknesses in those internal controls, particularly in data management and account reconciliation. Now, those might seem like technicalities, but they can have some pretty significant consequences.
Right.
Weak data management can lead to inaccurate reporting, difficulty in assessing risks, and problems with account reconciliation. That can increase the likelihood of errors, maybe even fraud.
Oh, wow.
So it's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the compliance concern as well about maintaining those digital records for their foreign branches. It's not just about their financial health in this moment.
Right.
It's also about making sure that they have those right systems and controls in place to navigate this increasingly complex regulatory landscape.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I feel like we've already covered so much ground.
Yeah.
But we've really just started to scratch the surface of New India Assurance's second quarter performance. I mean, there's so much more to analyze and discuss here. But for now, I'm going to take a little break
Okay.
and come back in part 2
Sounds good.
to really dig into those key takeaways and what it all means for our listeners. So see you soon.
Too soon.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So we just took this deep dive into New India Assurance's second quarter results. And, wow, there's a lot to think about. But now I think it's time to sort of step back, look at the forest for the trees. What are the key takeaways here for our listeners, whether they're investors or industry analysts or just, people interested in the world of insurance? What do we want people to remember from all this?
We've definitely unearthed a treasure trove of information, haven't we, from these documents?
Yeah, we have. But it can get overwhelming, right? Sifting through all that data. So let's try to distill it down to the essentials.
No.
You know, what are the big picture insights here?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's pretty clear that New India Assurance is a dominant force in the Indian insurance market. I mean, those
Yep.
financials, billions in premiums and assets, it really confirms that. But this quarter's results, they present kind of a mixed bag.
Right, right. So on the one hand, we see the impressive scale, we see that solid solvency ratio. But on the other hand, we've got the profitability that's down. And then, of course, those auditors' comments that are raising some, red flags potentially.
Exactly. And I think that's a crucial point for listeners to really grasp. A company can be huge, it can appear financially sound, but there can still be those underlying issues that warrant a closer look.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those messy reinsurance balances and that
Mhm.
unusual way they're classifying those fixed deposits. Those are the things that make me go, is this just a quirk or is there something more serious going on here?
It's really hard to say for sure without having more information. But those details, those little nuggets from the auditor's report, those are the things that investors and analysts should be paying attention to and saying, okay, I need to do a little more digging here.
Right.
Maybe scrutinize future disclosures or look at industry trends, maybe even reach out to the company directly and ask for clarification.
Yeah. It's like we found a couple of the puzzle pieces, but we need a few more to really get the full picture.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the stakes are high, right? Because we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about a company that plays a vital role in the lives of millions of people who are relying on their insurance policies.
Right. For protection. It's their financial safety net. You know what I think gets lost sometimes in these conversations about finance? We focus so much on the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
but insurance is ultimately about people. It's about providing peace of mind, knowing that if something goes wrong, you've got someone in your corner.
You're absolutely right. And in a world that is increasingly unpredictable, I mean, think about it. Climate risks are increasing, healthcare costs are through the roof, and you've got all this technology that's disrupting industries left and right.
Yeah.
Those needs for security and protection, they're only going to become more and more important.
Right. And that brings us to the bigger context surrounding new India Assurance. We've got the whole insurance industry that's going through this massive transformation right now.
Absolutely.
So how might those forces, the rise of technology, changing customer expectations, all these new regulations, how might all that impact a giant like new India Assurance in the coming years?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Will they adapt and thrive in this new environment, or will they struggle to keep up?
Right. It's almost like that classic David and Goliath scenario,
Yeah,
except in this case, Goliath is the incumbent.
right.
They're the giant, and they're facing off against all these nimble, tech-savvy startups that are trying to disrupt the way things have always been done.
Right. And the battleground is digital. I mean, the
Hmm.
customer experience, data analytics, innovative products, these are all critical now. So New India Assurance has to figure out how to use its size to its advantage,
Hmm.
but also become much more agile and responsive to all these changes that are happening around them.
Right, right. Okay, so just to sum things up for our listeners, I think we've gained some valuable insights into New India Assurance's performance.
Yeah,
But there are definitely still some open questions and uncertainties about the future. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right?
of course.
But we've highlighted their strengths. They're a dominant player in the market. They've got strong solvency. There's a lot of potential for growth, especially in some of those key segments.
Yeah.
But we've also uncovered those potential vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
those things that the auditors pointed out, the need for maybe a little bit more transparency, and that challenge of, can they really adapt to this rapidly changing industry landscape? So I think, we've provided a really great starting point for further investigation and analysis.
Absolutely.
For me, it's definitely got me asking more questions, thinking more deeply about what it all means, not just for the company itself, but for the whole insurance landscape.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping to do with these deep dives.
Yeah.
Give people the knowledge and the tools to make informed decisions, whether they're an investor, an industry expert, or just someone who wants to learn more.
Right, because knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
And in this case, it's the power to understand this really complex world of insurance and how it impacts our lives.
Exactly. And, the story of New India Assurance, it's kind of like the insurance industry itself. It's constantly evolving. What we're seeing now is just a snapshot. The real test is how they adapt and evolve to meet all those challenges and opportunities that are coming their way.
Right. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap up this deep dive, we've got one final thought-provoking point that we want to share.
Yes.
It's a perspective that I think is going to leave everyone listening really pondering, what's the future hold for New India Assurance? And, thinking about the role that insurance plays in our society. So let's move on to that last part. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into New India Assurance. We've, analyzed their financials, looked closely at the auditor's report, and explored the broader industry landscape. But we did promise one last thought, one last thing to kind of leave you with, and it might surprise you.
I think a lot of times when we talk about financial reports and company performance, we can get so caught up in the numbers,
Right.
the jargon, all
Yeah.
that. But it's important to remember that insurance, at its core, is a very human business.
It's a great point, yeah. Easy to forget that when you're talking about, solvency ratios and underwriting profits and all that.
Exactly. But every insurance policy represents a person, a family, a business, someone who's looking for protection against all those uncertainties that life throws our way.
Yeah.
It's about giving people that peace of mind, knowing that someone's going to be there to help if things go wrong.
And, in a world that seems, I don't know, increasingly uncertain, right? You've got climate change, economic ups and downs, healthcare needs constantly evolving. I feel like that sense of security is more important than ever.
Absolutely. So the question for New India Assurance, and really for the entire insurance industry,
Yeah.
is how are they going to adapt to meet the evolving needs of, a world that's changing and a customer that's changing right along with it?
And that's a challenge that goes beyond just, crunching the numbers or trying to maximize profits.
Right.
It requires, I think, a deeper understanding of the human experience.
Yeah. Will they be able to embrace new technologies to, personalize those policies, make the claims process easier, really try to mitigate risks in a proactive way? Can they use data and analytics not just to assess risk,
Hmm.
but to actually help people make smarter decisions about their financial well-being?
Right. And then what about, making insurance more accessible, more affordable?
Right.
Will they, champion financial literacy, financial inclusion, and make sure that insurance is something that empowers everyone, not just a select few?
It's a big question. These are the questions that will determine not only their financial success, for New India Assurance, but also their impact on the lives of millions of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, we really encourage you, our listener, to keep exploring, keep questioning, keep seeking a deeper understanding of, these forces that are shaping our world. Because knowledge is most powerful when it's shared, debated, and then, ultimately used to make a positive difference. So on that note, we'll wrap up this episode. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of New India Assurance. And until next time, keep learning and keep asking those insightful questions.